another Latinx Hispanic author character reading review video. Yes, video. So I just recently finished Romeo and Julieta, but while I was looking for more books, I also decided to, while I was reading Romeo and Julieta, I decided to open a NetGalley, and I tried to get a book and I got rejected, and then I tried another Hispanic book, and this time I got it. It does come out relatively soon, but I did get approved for one that did just recently came out, so it's kind of like within a window, and the book is called Twice a Quinceanera by Yamel Sadia Mendez. I hope I said that all correctly. This is, of course, another romance. It's contemporary romance. This is about a Hispanic woman who decides to finally stand up to her cheating fiance. Yes, cheating fiance, and breaks off the engagement, but her venue's already paid for, like everything's already set up, and she decides, based off of, is it a magazine? Yes, a magazine that she sees where some other person was celebrating the quinceañera again. She decides, why not? She's 30 or turning 30. Yeah, turning 30. So she decides, why not? It's, 15 plus 15 is 30. So it's her twice over quinceañera. If you don't know what a quinceañera is, it is like a sweet 16, except it happens at 15 instead of 16. And she decides to do that. She is from Argentina, from what the blurb says on Storygraph. So this will be another Latin American ethnicity that is not me, as I am Mexican American, but I can understand a lot of the similar culture. They do have different things, but many things are similar, or I can relate to things like that. Now, the romance kicker part is that as she's continuing to plan this wedding, quinceañera, the person who is in charge of the venue is an old college fling. And that's the thing. I think it's kind of like a second, it says at the bottom, second chance love. I haven't read too much of second chance love, because usually they take their like small town romances, and I don't really like small town romances to begin with, and then they're all like sweet country bumpkin kind of things, and I'm like, no. But this sounds very interesting. She is a professional, it says, so very like first generation. It kind of sounds like maybe second generation. So I'm interested to see that. We're going to be reading this. I'm going to be reading it as an audiobook in NetGalley. NetGalley's audiobooks are very small, and it's still relatively new from what I can see. And I pretty much now exclusively read audiobooks for time, but I also recently, I have to go back to confirm diagnosis, but I might be getting diagnosed with more severe eye problems, which means I most likely need to not stare at screens so much or strain my eyes as much, on top of other things which I may or may not share. I don't know. It's still kind of new, and it could have a huge impact on my life. But being that I now do enjoy audiobooks for sure, is a good step, because if anything, I at least can still enjoy books through audiobooks, even if I can't physically read anymore, or physically reading becomes problematic. So it's nice to see that NetGalley has audiobooks, because I can read books early, review books. Not that I said I wasn't going to become an booktuber, but who knows? I really am enjoying finding these Latinx authors, or Latine. I saw that that's a new word coming out. Authors, and this makes it more accessible to me, as reading on an ebook is difficult, and audiobook is just easier for me. So yeah, that is it for now. I will come back with more thoughts. Hopefully this one will be better, especially because this is a secret video versus the other ones where I usually tell the Ko-fi audience at minimum what I'm reading. But because this is technically an arc, even though the book just recently came out, I requested the book, and then like a couple days later, the book came out. So I'm technically reading it after its publication date. But because it's an arc, I'm going to kind of still treat it that way, where only the video gets to know what's happening and Ko-fi doesn't, because it's an arc. It's not like they can read it with me. So, yeah, I'll let you know, and hopefully I'll be better about checking in. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Okay, so quickly just have to say, I've just started listening to the book, and it starts right off with her breakup and going to tell her parents. Her anxiety, me wanting to cry for her, her parents being like, oh no, this is your fault, not being supportive, gives me like faux trauma response, because not necessarily that that's ever happened, but I've definitely had that feeling, and I feel like I've read other books like that, but it coming from a another Latin person. Also, this is the first time I've heard someone say Latin instead of Latinx, but I kind of almost wanted to cry while I was driving, because I was just like, not always assuming that it's your fault and that's your parents' response, and the fact that these parents did respond that way, I was just like, I mean, she also didn't tell the full truth, but yeah, I have emotions right out the bat. Also, she is a technically not first generation, because she was born in Argentina and then they moved here. So her goddaughter, her niece, and nephew are technically first generation. But stipulations, that doesn't matter. Okay, I just wanted to say I already have emotions and wanted to cry. Okay, so I just hit the 50% mark. There's not a lot of romance so far. I mean, we've met the love interest, we've had conversations, but she's still definitely dealing with her decisions to break up the marriage, and her feelings and things like that. I had an idea of what the conflict was going to be. I was almost there, not exactly there. And I'm still a little fuzzy on some things. I haven't clarified everything, but I prove no. This book is hitting on so many levels of her talking about needing to be like the perfect daughter, her parents pushing her, needing to feel like it's never enough. She has to keep just moving forward. You know, even though she does the best at this point, her parents are like, well, it now is the next level. And that's it. Just continuing to moving forward and not really celebrating or really truly recognizing each step it's just been like, okay, well, what about the next one? And even though she's not the oldest, she has that very similar role. And as the oldest, I definitely am relating to that. And it's very hard hitting. Ironically, as I'm kind of having a difficult week for many reasons. And yeah, I don't know what to feel about this book, and it's reading my soul. But I guess it's kind of the point of me wanting to read things that are reflective of me. So it's good. I just feel like crying at weird points. So okay, I'm gonna get back to listening to the book. But so far good. I am wishing there was more lovey stuff, as we are now 50% through the book. But I'm okay. I acknowledge that she needs time, and there's a whole thing. Reality needs to be reality. I'm just waiting. Wait. I at least better get a cast kissing, is all I have to say about that. Okay, I'm really. I'll see you next time. Welcome to the end of this book review vlog thing. This one was definitely more of a vlog. So I finished it, and I definitely felt emotions. So I definitely resonated with Nadia in the sense of feeling like you have to live up to this bar, and feeling like you constantly aren't actually achieving it because the people who you expect to be there waiting for you at the end just keep moving it higher and higher. I also felt, ironically, a kinship with her because I'm also going to be turning 30 next year. And I mean, I'm already married, and my husband is amazing. And like, in that sense, no. But the sense of feeling like that you're 30, but you need to be okay with your life situation and celebrating you, yourself, and who you are, and all the accomplishments you've made as a person, and how the idea of how do they call it, the double quinceanera. What is the word that they're calling it? Okay, it's not in the synopsis. I can't remember exactly how they word it, but the double quince, and using that as that soil, that really coming out, presenting yourself as who you are now, who you've made yourself. And I think that that's a really great idea, especially when the definition of what it is to be a woman, what it is to be a successful woman, what it is to be a woman of color, especially coming from Hispanic, she's actually a Latina background, being that she is her family is from Argentina, and that portrayal is different than what it was a few years ago. What is successful, but there are still people within that generation who perceive only one way to be successful. And if I can take a part of her situation also and relate to it, not in the sense of her marriage being that like final ticking stone where everyone would be proud of her and she's a success for the family and people are pushing her to that line. Not necessarily my immediate family, but I still have a larger family who don't agree with mine and my husband's position on not wanting to have a child, especially not now and maybe not ever. And we're fine with that, but many people seeing it as a downside or like poor me, that I am not having children, when for us that's not a success of us being a family, being a couple, being a unit. How many people have children and are in like loveless relationships, but they're staying together for the children, or they have, toxic relationship because they just think that's normal. And I can relate to it also in that sense. What I thought was great, which I can't relate to, is how her family came from like all over the place. And it definitely showed the immigration story in a different way. She had family coming from Argentina, from Brazil, from Australia, England, other parts of America, I think. Yeah. So there was a great mix, and they portrayed that well. And again, because I listened to this as an audiobook, they portrayed it very well in the audio. Each character had a very distinctive accent if they needed one, which was great. You could always tell who was speaking, and I greatly enjoyed it. And I also loved that idea that especially her family that was in other third world countries like Australia and England, her cousins were very much jumping on her bandwagon. I am all for this. Let's throw away the bad guy, the bad man, the garbage man, and let's celebrate you. You deserve it. And they were all for that, and it was amazing. It was great. Now, I'm gonna say a couple downsides, and then I'll do spoilers, and then we'll go back to doing my overall rating and final closing views. So my downside is I wish I had known this was a soft, like sweeter romance. So I'm glad that there's a mix, but I've been reading a lot of Latinx romance books that are quite spicy to like very spicy, with the You Had Me at Hola, I would say being so far top spicy that I've read so far. And this one I expected for it to be spicy, or for at least the angst to be going, but it wasn't. There were definitely times where she commented on it, like internally, and so did he, but then nothing happened. We were like over halfway, I think it was, before we had a kiss. There was very much pullback. And I will say it's fine because she's dealing with a lot of mental issues, self esteem, wanting to be her own self and not needing to be defined by a man. And I agree with that. I appreciate that. Ironically, in a way, I was in a very toxic relationship coming out of high school. And when I started dating my husband, I was in a very similar mindset, being very afraid of being taken advantage of. So I definitely, our relationship went, my sister says we went at a turtle pace of a relationship because I was very scared of going quickly or even at a normal pace and being tossed aside. So I can understand that. I just wish it had been somehow hinted at or mentioned in the synopsis, even if it had just been, at the bottom being like this subtly sweet romance or something along those lines. I wish it had mentioned something along that, because I definitely went in expecting it to be like all of the other Latinx books, romance books that I've read, that if it takes a long time, like the last book, um, Ramona and Julieta, where they did take a little while to like have intercourse, to have sex, they, at least the tension, the angst, the like, you felt the throb of the relationship and the pull and push and the like, if I touch it I'll burn myself, but I just want, like, it was there. And then you had the Ola, they didn't last very long and we're like right away, and I was like, cool, I'm for this train. Let's go. This one was not. And again, I'm fine with that. I just wish that it would have been somehow displayed, described, because I definitely think that this is a very important book, and a very good expression, a view of the Latinx lens that needs to be shown. And it is a romance because they obviously they do have their happily ever after, but I definitely went in expecting something and didn't fully get it. It was definitely one of those classic sweet romances, which I was fine, but it left me kind of wanting because I was expecting something and it didn't happen. So yeah, I would say that is the only downside to the book, was that the heat level wasn't properly represented in the synopsis. So yeah. Okay. Spoiler review. We'll be right back. I will leave time code and it's always chaptered, so you can just skip. Okay. So going along this with the thought of what I was disappointed on, I hated that the whole clutch of their falling apart, because there always has to be in a romance the point where like the protagonist and the love interest fall apart and have to go their separate ways. It was very quick and they glossed over, and the whole crutch of that was that it was the day that he was going to come over and they were going to have sex, and she dropped her phone in the tub and her phone died, and he never tried to call her. She never tried to call him. She even mentioned that she was terrified that he had gotten in an accident. If you truly felt that way, no matter if you felt that he had run away again, because the whole point of that is that they had been in a relationship before, because again, it's a second chance romance. And when the relationship was getting good, he got scared and ran away. And she just contributes him as a runaway love interest, someone that's not reliable. And she thinks that he did that when that didn't happen. The ex-fiance randomly shows up, and as he's leaving, because we see it from his point of view, and then we go back in the past and see it from her point of view and find out that, the ex showed up trying to get her back. She sent him away, and she also ran away to the room because she just didn't want to deal with him and was like, you have 2 minutes to get out of here, I'm going to call the police. And he walks away and opens the door and finds Marco. Is it Marcos? I think that's what his name is. The love interest at the door with wine and her favorite food. The total opposite of this man. And the man uses the whole thing of like, oh, I'm back and we're getting married again and blah, 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 blah. So I'm usually okay with like lack of communication, but this one was unrealistic. Unrealistic because even if her phone died, one of them would have texted them, especially if she had already had the thought that what about if something happened to him? What about if something happened to his dad? Because the reason he didn't come right away is because he got a call from his dad's home care nurse that he needed to come right away. Which he's fine, no parental death on in page. It's hinted at in the past, and if you want to know any other content warnings, they'll be on Storygraph. But so there's that. Also, they have like an almost out fight in front of her door, and earlier in the book, when she's at home and talking about things that happen at home, including the initial breakup, she mentions that the walls in her apartment are thin and that people can probably hear her. If that's the case, why can't she hear them outside? I know she's in her room, but why can't you see that? You also know this guy doesn't care about you and doesn't really know who you are. So why would you assume the food that he placed in the house, that he said he Ubered for you, was from him? I do delivery. I mean, I don't know if in a bigger city, because I know she lives in a bigger city, it's faster, but delivery is not that fast. So how could have he Ubered her like favorite food and left it there in time to then leave before she called the police? That whole situation, the like falling out that every couple has to do in a romance story, was unrealistic, and I did not like it. It was the part that did not make the most sense. Everything else, I could go with the sweet one. I could go with, the taking forever to kiss, them not communicating, especially because both of them have their own faults and they're both dealing with really big emotions and mental health stuff, and then trying to be their own person and not get together, but filling that hole, because again, it's a romance book. So I can understand all that. I can even understand at the end where he suddenly appears and Mackenzie, I think, is the assistant who was in love with him, like flips suddenly and decides that she's on team them when she hasn't been the whole book. I thought that was too quick of a turnaround. She should have done something else to show that she had suddenly turned the corner and was team them to begin with. I think that turnaround was too quickly. So I think this book could have been a little bit longer, had a realistic downside, taking a little bit longer for them to get back, because it's already sweet, it's already taking long. Just keep going with it, hon. Have a little bit more length in the time, because she literally just time skips. It's like 2 days before the wedding, the party, before the quince. I think they could have had, if they really wanted to go with this, besides having a better breakdown part of the relationship, it could have lasted longer. Them not talking, her re-coming into herself, because she continuously still, like, she's happy at the beginning of her quince, she's smiling, she's dancing with people, and then the author says, like, the character says in her head that, oh, but she misses him, and what is he doing? He's probably not even thinking about that. No, girl, this is you. Remember, at this point in the book, you should be confident in yourself. Yes, you don't have to be 100%. You don't have to be 100%. But no, it kind of just soured the whole point of the quinceanera and thing. It was her standing on her own, celebrating herself. She's a strong woman, and that she doesn't need a man. It should have been her being like, oh, I'm happy and blah blah blah, and maybe mentioning, oh, what would make this moment better is if Marcus was here dancing with me or something along those lines, and then he magically appears to dance with her, which is what he does at the end. And then, they walk away and like make out in the back of the barn in the garden. I think that would have been better. I feel like the end of the story was rushed. And I think that it could have had even like just another chapter to flesh out her, like, no, I'm fine, I can do this. If Marcos ran away again, it's fine. I don't need someone to complete me. I am complete on my own. And to hold on to that versus her just telling herself it's okay. She even had a beautiful moment with her mom and her cousins and all this stuff, and her dad, and it just, her self-doubt spoiled it for me. Because I get there's realistic, and then there's also fantasy. You could have totally done the fantasy route of, she mostly fixes herself. Like, I just didn't like it. It could have been longer. She could have been more self-confident. It was not realistic. I did not like it. End of spoiler. So, to wrap up with how did I feel about this? I loved it. I did relate to her on a definitely personal level. Did I relate to her or the book from a Latinx perspective? To a certain degree, and I think I mentioned a couple of those in the vloggy parts of this video, and I mentioned at the beginning of this clip, but it definitely wasn't my favorite of all the ones that I had. Part of it had to do with expectations were not laid out well, and what I mentioned in the spoiler part of the section of this section, and I would have been willing to read it for longer if the story would have had a more realistic closing. And I'm not talking about the epilogue. I think the epilogue was beautiful, but it didn't place well with how the main part of the story ended. And if you want more of that, again, I talked about it in the spoiler part. So I'm giving this a solid 4, or maybe a 4. I'm going to give it a 4.25 because I did relate to it a little bit as a Latinx person, a Hispanic woman. I should say Latinx because she's a Latina, Latinx person, and also just a woman who is also about to turn 30. I definitely had some relates to that. So I'm deciding. I'm giving it a 4.25. It wasn't bad. I definitely recommend people to read this. I had some iffy stuff at the end, but nothing that if it doesn't bother you, the story is so good. It bothered me, and it really was only after I was thinking about it a little bit more after I had finished it. I was like, yeah, you know what? I actually didn't like that. The first initial read through, it was still enjoyable. Also, go into it knowing it is not a spicy romance. It is a sweet romance. So that is my review of Twice a Quinceanera. And again, I would read it. It's a sweet romance. It's nice. And the audiobook is what I listened to it. The audio was nice. All the characters had their own accents when needed. You could tell who was talking. The Spanish transitioning was good. And yeah, 4.25 is where I'm living it. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. I greatly appreciate it. If you're interested in any more of this series, I will have a whole playlist here at the end screen with all the other books that I have read that I did mention in this video. You can see all those reviews there. Also on my Storygraph, you can see any of my reviews. And if you are interested, this is an exception, but normally when I am reading a book for this series, it will be on my Ko-fi. That is where I will announce it to my Ko-fi members, and I try to do a read along if I don't read it too quickly. And you can read along with me there on Ko-fi as a member and find out how I'm feeling about the book and what my final thoughts are before the video comes out and before I write the review on Storygraph. So you can do that. And if you're interested in anything else that I do gaming content, writing content here also on the channel. You can check all that out by hitting my face and going to the channel. I have plenty of playlists. And if you're interested in just anything I have upcoming up, hit the subscribe button and the bell to alert you. And yeah, I also have streaming content that is on my second channel, Dolores Madel Uncut. So yeah, thank you so much, and I will see you next time. Just rise and fast.